Nassourdine Imavov just put the entire middleweight division on notice. The sniper from Paris, France is coming off of a second-round knockout victory over the former two-time champion Israel Adesanya in Saudi Arabia. It took just 30 seconds into the second round of this fight before he put Israel Adesanya away and by far picks up the biggest victory of his entire professional career. He's now riding a 4-fight win streak. Roman Dolidze, a ranked fighter, Jared Cannonier, a ranked fighter and former title challenger, Brendan Allen, a ranked fighter who was on a 6 or 7 fight win streak when they fought, and now Israel Adesanya, the former two-time champion, the former light heavyweight title challenger, and arguably, or maybe not so arguably, the second best middleweight in UFC history, and Nassourdine Imavov just disposed of him. And I've got to say that prior to this finish happening, just 30 seconds into the second round, Israel Adesanya looked very, very good. And is that deja vu or what? Because if you go back to UFC 305 in August of 2024, he looked pretty damn good in that title fight with Dricus du Plessis up until the 4th round, about a little more than halfway through when he got submitted. Now, am I making excuses or trying to lessen the victory of Nassourdine Imavov? Absolutely not. He is on the map, and for those of you that didn't know how good he is, this is your introduction to it after beating someone like Adesanya. But I just want to say that for Izzy, having lost 3 fights in a row, 4 of his last 5, it looks so much worse when you look at that page and see all the red and not so much green as of late. But one, it's against the absolute best fighters in the world. Alex Pereira, a champion, a 2-weight world champion. Sean Strickland, former champion. Dricus du Plessis, the current champion. And now Nassourdine Imavov, arguably the second best middleweight on planet Earth right now. And outside of that weird performance he had against Sean Strickland a couple of years ago, he's looked very good. In the first fight with Alex Pereira, he was winning up until getting finished. In the fight with Dricus du Plessis, I thought he looked the best that he had looked since his second fight with Marvin Vettori, and that includes having numerous more title defenses over Jared Cannonier and Robert Whittaker. I felt that the version of Adesanya we saw in August was better than those versions, and yet he still lost. And here we were today, looking big, looking physical, looking strong, looked sharp and precise, as I already alluded to, was piecing up Nassourdine on the feet, was defending the takedowns very well and keeping the fight in his realm and keeping the distance that he wanted to fight at, but it just wasn't enough as Nassourdine Imavov launched forward with a beautiful right hook that sent Adesanya to the mat. Imavov did not let up. He went in for the kill. He smelt the blood in the water and gave the referee no choice but to stop the fight. Was it maybe a tad early? I'm not going to say it was. I'm not going to say it wasn't. It's a very quick judgment call, and regardless of if you felt it was early or not, there were very clean shots being landed to Izzy, not to mention the huge shot that put him on the ground. And when I was breaking down this fight on Friday, I went into the storylines that everyone was talking about. The motivation for Adesanya. Does he really want to be here? What's in it for him? Why is he still doing this? Yada, yada, yada. And I went back at that saying, I feel like if he wasn't motivated, he wouldn't take a fight like this against someone that is surging, ultra dangerous, and has nowhere near the name value that Adesanya does, yet he still elected to come in to Saudi Arabia and put on a fight against someone that he knew could be a threat to his current positioning and to the rest of his career. And even in the aftermath of this fight, I'm not going to say that he lacks motivation. Now, in this loss, we'll see what comes the next couple of days, couple of weeks on his mindset after this fight. But going in, I did not doubt Israel Adesanya's ability to win this fight, and I did not doubt his motivation or lack thereof, as people were saying, to still be fighting, because if he didn't want to fight anymore, he damn sure wouldn't have taken a fight against someone like Nassourdine Imavov. So I'm not here to matchmake or talk about what's directly next for Adesanya. I think it's back to the drawing board. He did bounce back pretty quickly. He just fought in August. Here he is in February. I believe we're going to see him at least one more time before the end of 2025. But he's no longer in the immediate title picture of the middleweight division. And that is the first time that we've been able to say that about Israel Adesanya since 2018. He's fought nothing but the best of the best over the past 7 years. Now he gets a chance to just take a back seat, let this new wave do what they got to do. The Dricus du Plessis, the Sean Stricklands, the Imavovs, the Khamzat Chimaev, so on and so forth. The Caio Bahaios, for example. Potentially Gregory Rodriguez when he fights Jared Cannonier in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, Israel Adesanya can rest his body. He can decide if he wants to continue to fight. He can decide if he wants to continue to fight at middleweight or if he wants to move up to 205 pounds to finish off his career. So be sure to let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this performance from Israel Adesanya up until that finish. Were you on the side of me thinking he was looking pretty good, much like he was looking against Dricus du Plessis in August? Or am I just looking too much into it? He didn't look as good as I thought, and Nassourdine is just that much better of a fighter. Let me know down below, as well as what you think should be next, if there is anything at all, for Israel Adesanya. And for the winner, the night belongs to Nassourdine Imavov on this tear right now. 4 fights in a row, all against ranked opponents, all against dangerous opponents. Hasn't lost a fight since January of 2023. That was on short notice, up a weight class at 205, and against Sean Strickland, who was a champion and is fighting 1 week from right now when I'm recording this to become a champion again. He was number 5 heading into this fight. Israel Adesanya was number 2. He will immediately hopscotch everyone and launch himself into that number 2 territory. And now, this is the biggest question that there is to ask in the aftermath of UFC Saudi Arabia. Who gets the winner of Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland next week at UFC 312? Is it Nassourdine Imavov or is it Khamzat Chimaev? Well, I posed this exact same question on social media at Verbal Spar MMA. On X specifically is where this poll went up, and 88% of the people went with the undefeated phenom, Khamzat Chimaev. And I'm going to be honest, this took me by surprise, especially as an MMA fan. We know how much recency bias can throw off our thoughts and our opinions, and I literally posted this minutes after Imavov finished Israel Adesanya, and to only have 12% of the vote truly was surprising, and it also shows the star power that Khamzat Chimaev has. So let's really dig into that question here. I already talked about the resume of Nassourdine Imavov over the last couple of years. If you fast forwarded for whatever reason, this is the win streak that he is on. Israel Adesanya, a second-round knockout. Prior to this, Brendan Allen, a unanimous decision win. Before that, a finish of Jared Cannonier. And before that, a decision over Roman Dolidze. All 4 fighters are in the top 15, most of them in the top 10 as a matter of fact, maybe even all of them. Yeah, all of them are, because Roman caps it out at number 10. So that is absolutely insane to have 4 victories over 4 top 10 fighters all in a row. That's a title-earning resume if I've ever seen one. And don't get me wrong, Khamzat Chimaev has quite the resume stacked up as well. We know what he just did at UFC 308. He ran through and steamrolled the former champion Robert Whittaker, disposed of him in less than 1 full round via submission. Before that, he defeated the long-reigning welterweight champion Kamaru Usman on short notice, up at 185 pounds, so on a 2-fight win streak here at middleweight. But before that, he was down at 170 pounds for the other big wins, Gilbert Burns and Li Jingliang and Kevin Holland. So essentially, you have to stack it up this way. Is the 4-fight win streak against 4 top 10 opponents for Nassourdine Imavov, capped off by a knockout over former 2-time champion Israel Adesanya, better than a 2-0 slate at 185 pounds against Kamaru Usman, former welterweight champion on short notice, and a first-round submission destruction over Robert Whittaker for Khamzat Chimaev? Dare I say, this is the second biggest question of all of mixed martial arts for 2025 right now, following is Tom Aspinall versus John Jones going to happen this year? So please let me know in the comments below, is it Nassourdine Imavov or is it Khamzat Chimaev? And the debate stays very relevant because 1 week from right now when I'm recording this is when the title in this weight class gets defended. Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland 2 at UFC 312. And from the UFC Saudi Arabia main event recap, let's recap the remainder of the card, and we jump into the co-main event where MVP Michael Venom Page, the number 15 ranked welterweight, bumps up to middleweight and takes out the number 14 ranked undefeated Shara Bullet. Shara Magomedov. While I was very excited for this fight and it was very anticipated for me as an MMA fan, especially a hardcore fan, MVP versus Shara Bullet played out how we should have expected it to play out. A high-level chess match on the feet, and it showed here that Michael Page was just too much to handle for the 30-year-old Shara Bullet. The scorecards were 30-27 times 2 and 1 29-28 scorecard, so MVP really controlled this fight, maintained the distance that he wanted it at, counter-struck his way to a very convincing victory, much like he did in his UFC debut last year at UFC 299 against Kevin Holland. And if we want to revisit his fight against Ian Machado Gary at International Fight Week last year, you could argue MVP should be 3-0 in the UFC since coming over from Bellator. If it wasn't for Ian Gary getting that fight down in the third round and taking the back of Michael Venom Page, you could say he was on his way to winning that fight 2-1. And imagine how much different things would be if he would have been the one to defeat Ian Machado Gary, give him the first loss of his career. Would it have been Michael Venom Page versus Shavkat Rakhmonov? I don't know. And so in his very next fight, not only does he take on another undefeated prospect in Shara Magomedov, but he does it up a weight class at 185 pounds, and he beats him at his own game. This was a very good performance from both guys, but it just showed that Shara still has levels to grow and evolve in his game, and being that he's 30, right in his prime, I believe that he can do so. But MVP, 37 years old, he's been around this game for a very long time. He has 26 professional fights now. He was in the Bellator promotion for well over a decade, a homegrown talent over there, and he's paying dividends now as a UFC fighter. Going to be ranked in 2 divisions come Tuesday morning. What do we want to see next for the former longtime Bellator veteran turned 2-1 UFC fighter? I think if he goes back to welterweight, we got to do the fight that all the fans keep wanting to see. It's him versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And let's say he does decide to stay at middleweight for another fight or two, play around up here at 185 pounds. Well, I know that there's one top 15 middleweight that said he was interested in fighting in April, and that's former title challenger, number 11 ranked, Paulo Costa. So that's what I want as an MMA fan. If MVP goes back down to 170, his true weight class, I want to see him versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, the longtime veteran, the multi-time title challenger, currently ranked number 11. And if he decides to stay at 185 for a little bit longer, let's give him the number 11 ranked middleweight, former title challenger, Paulo Costa, the heavy hitter. Oh man, would that be fun. The counter striker versus the aggressor in Costa. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those matchups. I'm here for this MVP run as long as we got it. In the featured bout, we saw the number 4 ranked Sergei Pavlovich take on the number 9 ranked heavyweight Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and it's a fight that there's not a lot to take away in terms of what we saw in the cage. However, Sergei Pavlovich ended his 2-fight losing streak, and he ended the 2-fight win streak of Biggie Boy Rozenstruik. Sergei was on a 6-fight first-round knockout win streak before he met Tom Aspinall in November of 2023 for the interim heavyweight title, where he would get finished in the first round, then go on to fight one more time in 2024 and lose a decision to Alexander Volkov. And the mystique and aura around Pavlovich and him being the most dangerous man in the UFC was kind of gone, and although he did bounce back here with a convincing victory over Rozenstruik, he didn't quite do anything that was ultra impressive. However, being that he was on this losing streak, you gotta just think he wanted to feel what it was like to taste victory again by any means necessary. So I'm not gonna rain on his parade or on this fight, on this performance too much. It's a good win for him to bounce back, to hold his spot amongst the top 5. But the heavyweight division is a bit of a mess right now. The biggest question in MMA for 2025, is John Jones going to fight Tom Aspinall, is still on the board. Then we have Ciryl Gane getting a very controversial, dare I say even a robbery victory over Alexander Volkov at UFC 310. And had Volkov won that fight, would have been on a 5-fight win streak. And now we have this fight here between the number 4 and number 9 ranked heavyweights that was relatively lackluster. And the guy that won is holding his spot, yes, but has been in there with the current interim champion and lost, and against another borderline number 1 contender, even though he lost to Ciryl Gane and Alexander Volkov. Do you see the issue here? But with that said, there is a fresh matchup to be made while we wait on John Jones and Tom Aspinall, and it is Ciryl Gane versus Sergei Pavlovich. It's it. It doesn't get more simple than that if you're the UFC. While we wait for the title fight, you book a true number 1 contender fight right before it, right alongside it, right after it. Pavlovich at number 4, Gane at number 2. Come on. We saw lock dog Vinicius Oliveira improve to 3-0 in the UFC, and at just 29 years old, he's 22-3 overall. Of those 22 victories, 18 of them are by way of finish, and although he didn't finish Said Nurmagomedov, he weathered an early storm in round 1, bounced back and looked very good in rounds 2 and 3, made Said fight until he couldn't press forward anymore, gassed him out. Oliveira remained the fresher fighter, landed the bigger shots, had the better output in the grappling realm as well, which I didn't see coming. This was a solid performance from Oliveira, off the back of a shutout performance over former ranked fighter Ricky Simón, off the back of a 2024 Knockout of the Year nominee against Bernardo Sopai in his UFC debut. I like Vinicius Oliveira, and this fight and this performance, this victory, shows how deep 135 pounds run. Am I opposed to him getting a ranked fighter next in his 4th UFC fight? Absolutely not. In the back half of bantamweight, we have number 15 Montel Jackson, number 14 Marcus McGee, and number 13 Ayman Zahabi. Might as well go up to number 12 Kyler Phillips. I think any of those 4 guys could be a great next step up for Vinicius Oliveira, because again, once you've already beaten Ricky Simón and Said Nurmagomedov and you're still not ranked, there's not much further you can climb before you fight someone with a number next to their name. And much like that fight showed the depth at 135 pounds, Fares Ziam versus Mike Davis showed the depth at 155 pounds, as someone's 4-fight win streak had to end and someone's streak had to increase to 5, and that was on the side of Fares Ziam as he gets the decision victory in a bloody back and forth war. There was a lot more grappling in this fight that many of us had anticipated going into the fight. We thought it was going to be more of a stand and bang style of matchup, but that's not to say that this was not entertaining, because the grappling transitions, the submission threats, the ground and pound strikes from both guys was a thing of beauty. Mike Davis, even on the losing side, had one of the most beautiful takedown transitions to mount that I've ever seen, at least in recent memory, but it wasn't enough, as Fares Ziam is now on a 5-fight win streak. Before this, had a devastating knockout over former ranked fighter Matt Frevola. He absolutely needs to be fighting someone in the top 15 next, may even get himself ranked without fighting someone come Tuesday. We have the number 15 Grant Dawson, who just re-entered the rankings after his victory over Diego Ferreira last week. Benoit Saint Denis at number 14, Jalen Turner at 13, and Paddy Pimblett at number 12. And much like I said for Vinicius Oliveira, any of those 4 guys would be very fun matchups for Fares Ziam, who is very long, very rangy, and very well versed in all facets of mixed martial arts. We go back to the messy heavyweight division to talk about a one-punch knockout from Shamil Gaziev as he knocked out Thomas the Train. He did that 3 minutes and 12 seconds in, put Thomas Petersen on his back, and now Shamil Gaziev is the number 14 ranked heavyweight in the world and is 3-1 in the UFC. He could pretty much fight anyone that's ranked ahead of him, whether that's a Waldo Cortez Acosta, a Tai Tuivasa, a Marcin Tybura, you name it, I'm open for him to fight. We need movement in this heavyweight division. We need fresh faces. We just need a lot of help, to be quite frank. Is Terrance McKinney the most must-watch fighter in the UFC at the moment? This man has 23 professional fights and has not once seen the judges' scorecards and hardly ever even made it out of the first round. 16 wins, 16 finishes, 8 knockouts, 8 submissions. Oh my goodness, it doesn't get any better than that. He gets the first round TKO 2 minutes and 1 second in against Damir Hadzovic. He's now won 3 of his last 4 fights. All of them a combined, 1 minute and 45 seconds plus 2 minutes and 1 second, 3 minutes and 46 seconds. And to make it even more insane, all 16 of those victories that are by stoppage have all come in the very first round. Once you get Terrance McKinney out of the first 5 minutes, you're more than likely going to beat him. But if you're in there with him for the first 5 and aren't prepared, you're probably going down. And in all seriousness, being that he's won 3 of his last 4 fights, he is not that far away from a ranked fighter at 155 pounds. However, you just have to put it together more. He's been inconsistent. I will say that his only loss in those last 4 fights was to Esteban Ribovic, who is a very highly touted prospect right now. Had one of the best fights of 2024 against Daniel Zellhuber at Noche UFC last September. So Terrance McKinney, if he can rally together 1 or 2 more wins in a row, then we're really talking a top 15 ranking. Jasmine Jasudavicius improved her win streak to 4 in a row, and none bigger than against a former title challenger in Mayra Bueno Silva, former flyweight for 4 fights in the UFC, turned 5-fight bantamweight in the UFC, now back at flyweight, but it was not enough as Jasmine pretty much from pillar to post controlled this fight and borderline dominated this fight. Mayra never really had any big moments. You could tell she was visibly getting frustrated as the fight went on. Jasmine was getting the better of her on the feet outside of a couple strikes and submission threats from Mayra, and on the ground she had no answers as Jasmine held top control, rained down ground and pound, and looked for submissions constantly for 15 minutes. She's number 12 in the flyweight division as it currently sits heading into UFC Saudi Arabia, and her only 2 losses through 9 UFC bouts, Natalia Silva, someone who I think is going to be a future flyweight champion, and Tracy Cortez, a now multi-year top 15 flyweight. I would love to see Jasmine get a crack at someone like a Jessica Andrade, a big-name fighter who's been a former champion, who's challenged for titles, and has fought in all 3 of the women's weight classes and gotten finishes in all 3 of the women's weight classes. She deserves a rightful step up after taking out a title challenger, especially someone coming down in weight. I want to see Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Jessica Andrade next. And last but not least, Bogdan Grad made good on his UFC debut by getting a second-round TKO against Lucas Alexander. He's now on a 4-fight win streak. He's 15-2 overall with 12 finishes and only 29 years old, so about to enter his prime. He had an amazing fight last year on the Contender Series against Michael Ashwell. He got a split decision win, and I believe both of those fighters got performance bonuses even on the Contender Series, and I think Ashwell may have even gotten a contract in defeat. Don't hold me to that, but it was an incredible bout that Dana loved from both guys. And now Bogdan in this featherweight division is now a 1-0 UFC fighter. My hat is off to the fighter that hails from Austria as he looks to continue making his mark in this UFC 145-pound weight class. So that is it for all things UFC Saudi Arabia. Give me your thoughts and your biggest takeaways in the comments below from that main event. What is next for Nassourdine Imavov? Is he next for Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland winner? Is it Khamzat Chimaev? Is it going to be a number 1 contender bout against Khamzat Chimaev? Let me know your thoughts on that title picture, what you think is next for Israel Adesanya, and everything else on this stacked UFC Fight Night card. If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week, I recap the most meaningful results from every card. Heading into each weekend, I break down the biggest and best fights and talk about the storylines and what is at stake, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at VerbalSpar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.